First one, in the classical world, one of the big questions that bothered all the different philosophical schools was how to live the good life. What did it mean to live the good life? This was a big question for them. That wasn't about having lots of money and stuff. It was really about personality, about character. This is a big question for the ancients. But nobody ever recommended the character of humility. Nobody ever recommended the character. If you ever saw the Greek word humility, it was always in a negative context. It was always seen as something servile or something submissive or something that a person would not definitely aspire to. And it was Jesus Christ who really turned that on its head. And as I said before in other sermons, another virtue is hope. Hope is another thing which the ancients were very cautious about. But humility is what I want to talk about briefly today, because Jesus was known as a humble man. And he was, the way he went to his death, the way he absorbed the criticisms he had from others, the way that he dealt with people. He wasn't weak, he wasn't a pushover, but there was a humility about his character which commanded itself to people and which his followers realized was absolutely critical and crucial. The word crucial, by the way, comes from crucifix. It means at the center, the heart of things. For Christians to be humble, we know when somebody is talking a good talk, but there's something missing. There's a lack of humility there. It rings false. Now, you expect it in lots of places in the world. It's fine. But when you find it in church, it's really, really unfortunate. It gives off a wrong sense, a wrong vibe. So one of the key things that Paul is saying here, coming out of the gate, really, of this next chapter, this next section of his letter to the Ephesians, he's begging them, I beg you to walk in a manner worthy of your calling. And the first thing he said was humility, with all humility. So when we talk about the unity of the church and all its differences and all its conflicts and all its disagreements, it's fine. Our sister church and the Church of England are going through what will probably lead to a permanent split in the church, with good people, faithful people on either side who have different understandings of same-sex relationships and marriage and so on. These are genuinely good people, all right? Very important. Unfortunately, some of the way the debate has happened has not been very humble. A lot of it has, some of it hasn't. And my own personal feeling is, I don't care where churches end up. I don't care where churches end up in terms of these big questions that may divide people, so long as the way they do it is a way of humility. And that doesn't mean any lack of conviction. It's just the way you are to other people is always open to being corrected. There's always an openness, there's a humility there. There's not bludgeoning other people with your perspective. You say, I in all humility read the Bible this way. This is how I am. This is where I am. So humility is, as a disposition, is absolutely crucial for unity within the church. Not only does it apply to vestry meetings, but it can apply to church plans. It can apply to how we organize the Mothers' Union for the year. All these different ways that we have our different agendas and things to go, having a disposition of humility to one another is absolutely important. So that's the first thing. Second thing, and I'm missing an awful lot, before it's a whole sermon series in this passage. Anyway, the second one, he has this famous set of lines where Paul talks about the effort, make every effort, and this Greek word, every effort, make every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. The English translation just doesn't get the dynamic, almost desperation behind that word, every effort. It's just like, give it everything you have. This is important. Throw everything but the kitchen sink at it, or maybe plus the kitchen sink. Make every effort. Paul is saying unity is not just an add-on. It's not just something we drift to if we all agree and it's all nice. You have to consciously make every effort to maintaining. It has this wonderful set of lines, and it's such a Trinitarian sentence. It's the unity of the Spirit, one Lord, one faith, one God, one baptism, God and Father of all. It's a tremendous record of God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and the oneness of that. The oneness of that. So I think the second crucial dimension to church unity is the fact that God is one. It's not mine, not Sue's, not Edward's. It's God is one. God is in himself, who he is, no matter what we may think or not think. And there is something about this unity of God being in himself, irrespective of what our beliefs are or aren't, that God is who he is, that should keep us humble. I have a suspicion that we're all slightly wrong when it comes to God. We can't all be right, because we all think different things, all right? Okay? So I suspect God being God, we're all slightly wrong. We're all missing something. We're all missing different things. Maybe collectively we have it all together. I don't know. But this wonderful vision that Paul has is in the oneness of God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, is that this person is who he is. It's been quite interesting. Just a bit of an aside, but the kind of fascination about Keir Starmer's personality, all right? And lead up in the election, there was all this thing about he wasn't very interesting, he wasn't kind of very charismatic, he wasn't quick, he wasn't this, he wasn't that, and he was just himself. And it's quite interesting that people, it was as if the press wanted him to be a bit more interesting than he was. Now, I'm not making a political case here, I'm simply saying that a person is who they are, no matter how you may want them to be. They are who they are. And Keir Starmer is who he is. Maybe boring. He might get some things done, who knows? But it's very interesting the way that the press and the media try to kind of find something else to make it a bit more exciting about him, you know? And here, we could be like that with God. I think God is continually disappointing people because he isn't quite what they would like him to be. Because God is just who he is in himself. And I think it's really important that our unity as a church is not based necessarily on the creed or the things that we may all agree with or disagree with. These are all important things. But at the end of the day, the unity of the church is based on God's personality. God cannot be divided. So because God cannot be divided, the church cannot be divided. Now, this may seem crazy in a world in which we have lots and lots of different churches. We've just come back from Germany and Austria, where there's lots of, you can't move without bumping into a crucifix somewhere. On every street corner, on the top of every mountain, and all this, there's glorious Baroque churches and all this stuff. But the history of Germany is riven with religious disputes over 30 years' war and so on. Terrible. But the unity of the church is the church as God sees it. It's not our different denominations. God looks at his church. He knows the people that are his, and that is the church. And the unity of the church is something that God guarantees. And we have to work towards it by getting on with each other. But at the end of the day, the church cannot be fundamentally destroyed because the church's identity is based on who God is. Thirdly, then, you have a sudden change. You have this big picture stuff from Paul that suddenly, in the second paragraph, Paul makes it very personal. But each of us, it suddenly gets very personal. Each of us, and basically the section here, but each of us has been given different gifts. Now, we're not going to go down this whole rabbit hole, just in the inverted commas here, because that's another whole discussion about God ascending and descending, and Stuart manfully made his way through that long paragraph there. We're going to skip that. But what this is saying is that Jesus has given us all unique gifts. He's given us all unique gifts. Now, there are 5 different lists in the New Testament, all from Paul, I think, actually, of different sets of gifts, coming to around about 20. And there are many more. Okay, so this is just 5 in this particular list. And this particular 5 are to do primarily with church leadership. Now, church leadership is very important. I've just finished one 3-hour report I'm doing another one tomorrow for 2 young ladies who are going forward for ministry. We take this very seriously in the Episcopal Church. It's almost as difficult to get into the SAS as to get into the Episcopal Church. We're very thorough in our vetting and making sure that who we have as leaders are trustworthy people. Don't always get it right, but anyway, there we are. So some are apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Now what Paul is saying here is that all these people have been given gifts and skills to equip the church. So my job is to enable you guys to do your job. And each of you have got gifts that make the whole thing work. I've loved watching the Olympics, just dipping into the highlights now and again. And one of the things that comes across is each athlete, behind them is a whole team of people. Behind each athlete is a whole team of people, of coaches, of parents, of mentors, down through the years that have got them to this place where they're on the floor or on a horse or they're swimming or whatever. Behind each person is a whole team. And this person is gifted, but they wouldn't be able to do what they do unless there was a whole team using their gifts to get them to this place. I'm also reading a long book, my kind of long summer book, about Abraham Lincoln's cabinet in the Civil War, American Civil War. It's called A Team of Rivals. And each of these guys, they were all men, and I really do apologize, but they're all men. And they were all such different blokes who often didn't like each other, but were all good at what they did, all different gifts. And part of Abraham Lincoln's skill, part of his magic, was being able to get this team of rivals to work together. And it was hard work, making the unity work. But he got there in the end. And so this sense that we've all got diverse gifts and different opinions and different personalities and different views on things, this is a healthy thing. So part of the unity of the church is the diversity of the church. The fact that we're not all the same as me, thank God for that. Because even within our little church of St. James, even just a small group this morning, I know most of you well enough to know that you've got quite different stories, quite different gifts, quite different personalities. And you all bring different things to our church. We've got 3 folk who've just started coming this last year. And it's been lovely to see what you guys have brought to the church already. So the unity of the church, part of it is not uniformity, but is diversity within that unity, which really makes it fly, which makes it work. And it's all for building up the body now. We hope to have our family fun day on the 23rd of August. There's a list in the hall that you can volunteer for it for. Now, there may be a real possibility that we have to cancel it this year because we may not have enough volunteers to make it work. That's a serious possibility. I need to really know who can and can't help because some key people might be away. So as a church leader particularly, I have to think, how do I use the gifts that we have, but also the energy levels that you have and your availability of time and the other complications that are there. All these things are there so we can do what we can do, but part of our responsibility is saying there are some things we just might not be able to do because we haven't quite got all the people in the team there. And that's okay. That's fine. But it's being responsible enough to see through, this is God's church, we can't do everything, but people who are here, just bring what you have. Let's make the most of it. Let's do what we can. And that's fine.